It's easy to lose sleep when you're worried about your health insurance plan. But when you have a family counting on you to take care of them, having the right coverage is more important than ever. That's why Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield is here to help. With low to no cost plans for you and your family, so you never go it alone. That's our Anthem. Click to learn more.
What's up, y'all? This is Neena Perez, and this is Straight Talk, No Sugar Added. And I know that you are here to listen to the best humans on the planet to grow, challenge, and transform your thinking. Let's do this. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited that you're here. This community has been growing by leaps and bounds, and I know it's because I bring you the best humans on the planet to grow, challenge, and transform your thinking. And so I found another amazing human, and here he is. His name is Tonkin, and he's the CEO and founder of the Conservatory Group, an organization that provides high-touch services to business executives that want to improve themselves, their teams, and their environment. You know, I am huge about impacting your teams because that's going to be a great way for you to really structure your organization and to grow moving forward. Now, he holds a Ph.D. in organizational leadership, a master in science in organizational leadership with honors. So let's just say he's a leadership expert. So here we have him. Here is Tom. How are you doing today, Tom?
Neena, it's a pleasure, and I know we're going to have a great time. You bring enough energy for everybody.
So I've been told. Oh, Tom, this is great. So I know I told a little bit about you, but I do want you to dig in a little bit more. Who is Tom Tonkin? I know it's a little question, but give us what you got.
So my tagline is I'm a recovering executive, right? So you sit there and live in the corporate world for 25, 30 years, and you're doing the thing, and you learn stuff, and then you go back and you try to think about the sort of the legacy you want to leave. You said, how can I help people? Like, I've done a lot of informal coaching through the corporate world. I'm thinking, how more formal could I be? How could I take some of my examples and my ideas and experiences and bottling up and maybe short circuit some of that for some of the people out there? And so I'm a leadership expert. I focus a lot on sales as a functional world.
Oh, good.
And I've happened to be doing DE&I stuff way before D&I stuff used to be cool and talked about. My main shtick, if you will, is research. Everything that I do comes from not only research, but original research. And that's how I bottle up some of these ideas. Sometimes those ideas are counterintuitive. But they're always very, very helpful. So hopefully I can share some of those with your audience today.
Yeah, I hope so. I do have a lot of people that are in sales. I mean, I just do. I have a lot of leaders here, a lot of leadership conversations that happen on this show. And it's for a reason. I'm a leader myself. I love what I do. I love impacting people's lives that way too, right? Like, I know that everybody's always like, oh, escape the corporate rat race, but I actually kind of like it, you know? So, and I think it's a different personality that comes with that. And I love leadership. I love impacting people. I love having these conversations. So, Tom, tell us a little bit about, where in the corporate world were you? Where did you come from? What field?
So I all in technology as far as industry is concerned.
Okay.
So I've been in technology, back since in the early 80s, and moved through the corporate world, starting as a technician and moving my way through into more of a business side, and eventually an executive leading teams. And one of the things that I've done over the period of time is sort of taken a step back, sort of jumped out and helped those sort of alongside coaching people, mentoring people, sort of outside of the influences, if you will, of corporate America, but so I can travel, unencumbered, if you will, through corporate America, and also be able to help those that are in it. And maybe help people see, around corners and what might be coming up. So it's always been around technology, around sales, sort of front end, customer facing kinds of things. But I've taken a different route in multiple ways. One of them is I was a musician for many, many years.
Oh, cool.
And I learned music in a traditional way in a music conservatory, hence conservatory group. And I learned music in such a way that I thought to myself, could I apply the same kind of learnings, but in a business sense? And so if we
Love
start
that.
talking about me and what do, I intersect a couple things. Number one, leadership. Number two, sort of this music approach to learning how to deal in business. And lastly, kind of an academic, research-based models, analytics, all that goes with it. So I can give people real-time help, because what might have worked, say, I don't know, 5-10 years ago may not work today, because
Right.
culture changes and things are moving so quickly, might not be as effective if we use yesterday's frameworks today.
And that's a very good point. I was going to ask you about that because, being in the field as long as you have, I'm sure you've seen a lot of changes, right? So did you get out of the field, as because you wanted to retire and leave the corporate field, or was there something in you that needed more? Like, what was that experience?
Well, one of the main reasons that I did this was because I felt that I wanted, freedom in a couple ways. I think freedom is the punchline, but freedom in a couple ways. Freedom is, to take time off and go and do things whenever I feel like doing them, but also freedom in the sense of doing things what might be counterintuitive. So sometimes when you are in a structure, and again, this isn't right or wrong, it just is. When you're in a structure and you're trying to scale a large company, the way you do that is you have to have processes and procedures that everybody follow and be able to sort of march in the same direction. I think that's a very efficient way to do it. The problem is if you're too rigid, anything that goes counter that process or even just outside that process usually gets squashed. And some of the best ideas, and I think, Neena, you know this, some of the best ideas, some of the most outgoing ideas are ones that are not necessarily part of what I would call status quo.
Right.
And so I felt to myself, how can I investigate and examine things outside of corporate America within corporate America? And that is somewhat of a challenge. I think everyone on this podcast, I think, would have an appreciation for that. You have this idea that you sort of have to do your job, have to stay in your lane. And again, that's part of the scalability aspects of corporate America, but that also may stifle any innovation or anything that's counter to that process. And so that was one of the, how should I say, motivations for me to do what I've done.
Yeah. How have you been finding that process now? Because I'm wondering now, I'm a little bit on the other side of this, these last 2 years that have been a complete struggle, right? And now, because your finger's still on the pulse, I mean, you're still out here helping businesses and leadership. I've noticed and I haven't noticed, the whole world has noticed, there's just been this big struggle with employees, the level of employee that you get, and the longevity of these employees, right? So leadership is to me, I'm a more of a servant leader. I like to show and serve and also lead. And I'm having challenges. I'm having challenges, right, as leaders. And the more I speak to people on this podcast, and even the people that I coach, they're going through these things too, right? So how have you found that, like, thinking outside of the box the way you are now and trying to pour back into, corporate world and into these businesses? Have you been finding it more welcoming now, or are people still trying to stick to their rigidness?
Well, I think they've lost their way to the rigidness. Because I mean, I think you're alluding to the fact that we've had this pandemic over our head now for the last few years, in this sort of work from home and just the entire, what I would call, social disruption,
Right.
that has affected the business world. And now what you see is, again, you've seen the Great Resignation. People, 4 million jobs a month at one point.
Yeah.
People are resigning, and I think they're resigning because I think they've been sitting at home thinking. Right? They've been sitting at home thinking, like, is this it? Is this what I've got? What is it that I really want to do? Where in the past, because the freedom was there of, heck, right, jumping on a plane, going to see a customer, or whatever you needed to do, go to the office or not go to the office or do whatever, people were just moving so quickly that they really didn't stop and think. And so now not only were the social constraints put on businesses, but even social activities like concerts and events and everything. So everybody kind of stayed home.
Yep.
And I think what happened is people started thinking about it. Now they're going, okay, so now all this stuff is lifted. Right? But I think people are coming back like, do I really want to go back to the way it used to be? How do I get back? Like, how do I get back to what used to be normal? And the term I use is we have a new normal in place. We have a new normal in place. And so therefore, I think we have to find our way, not necessarily back, but to a different way of operation.
Yeah,
and that's my observation. Lots of people that I coach and manage and help never ask me that question precisely, right? They never come out and say, gee, Tom, I've kind of lost my way to new normal. But what they imply is exactly that. It's like, how do I get back to some kind of routine where the old routine really doesn't work anymore?
Yeah.
So I
think it's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, for the person, right? The person thinking, do I want to go back to that role? Do I like the stress that came with that role? Do I want to not be with my family after I've been with them for 2 years in the house? And those are really good questions to ask yourself. It really is. I mean, I think some families, at least some of them that I've spoken to, the dad cannot picture himself now going to the office for 50, 60 hours and not being with his kids. He just can't do it. Right. And I respect it. I do. I respect it. But the business must go on. Right. And so that's the other end of it. Right. The companies, the people that have to still serve the public and the people out there. So that's where I see the challenge, right, with the leadership and all of that. I was just talking to someone a little while ago who was talking about leadership as well, and how to have people in leadership have more empathy and compassion and things like that, because we've changed. It's not like hard anymore. It's not like this. Let's get in our feelings, right? And Tom, I'm just not a get into your feeling type of person, but I do believe in leadership and serving others and all of that. So I'm just wondering, how do you see it going? How do you see it going, Tom? Do you see this? Do you feel like more leaders now are really seeking your type of services, seeking out, wanting to be better leaders, really trying to lift up their level of empathy and servanthood and leadership and all of that? Or do you see a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit of resentment, maybe some pushback? Because honestly, some of the people that I've spoken to that are in big corporations are a little ticked, right? That people are, acting the way they are. And so you have this dichotomy, right? These people are some people are, no, we need to change and we need to really be more empathetic to what our people are going through. And then the other side is like, okay, but I think it's gone too far now. Right.
I think so, if you're asking me right now in September, I think people have come to the resignation that something different has to happen, and they don't know what that different is.
Yeah.
As you recall, maybe 6 months ago, a year ago, when some of this stuff was getting lifted, there was a lot of mandates. Like now, okay, come, pick a day, right? April 1st, right? Everyone must be in the office now. Because they didn't know how, right? Anytime you kind of lose people's connection through your inspiration, right? So as a leader, you should be inspiring. The problem is what lever do you pull when you aren't inspirational, where you've run out of ideas? You go to the mandate. Okay, so okay, enough of this nonsense. Everybody show up on April 1st, and people are going, well, no, I don't think so. I don't want to do that. And you've got large companies that invested a lot of money in infrastructure and buildings in place, and they're thinking to myself, what are we going to do? And over the last 2 years, we've all learned how to get along from doing our work at home.
Yeah.
I mean, internet connections, computers, phones, whatever you need, printers, if you will. I mean, whatever you need at work, people have now settled into okay, this is my work area.
Right.
I remember when I first started working from home, at the beginning, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when people would say, I think today I'm going to work from home, because usually you would start by saying, I've got a doctor's appointment in the middle of the day. It's closer to my house,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and then what would happen would be, and I remember this because I've been living in the same house for many years. You would just sort of pull your laptop and sit in the kitchen,
Yep.
right? And you knew that that's a temporary thing. You didn't have bookshelf or anything in the kitchen. You would just do your work in the kitchen, and then you'd be done for maybe 4 hours, put your laptop away, go to your doctor's appointment. But that next Monday, you're in the office, all that. Now you got people with offices, right?
Right.
Now you got people with bookshelves and office material and internet and certainly all of the tools, the rise of Zoom and all this other stuff. And people are
Yeah.
like wondering, it's like, why am I going home? I mean, to an office where in the past it had stuff that I didn't have at home. Now, arguably, I've been working at home for a long time, but I wouldn't even know what to do if I had to go to the office, because I have an office, by the way. I have a conference room. I have a whiteboard hanging on my wall, right? I've got
Right.
all this
Right.
stuff, right?
Right.
And I've been able to replicate all that. So I think people are coming around thinking, what's the value of going back? And to your point, I want to highlight something you said earlier. Especially those, I'm just going to come out and say, especially men who've traditionally been ones that would go home and for the most part, either you have the wives, if you will, or women that would stay home or take care of the kids. I think the men, now mind you, I'm much older, so I didn't have this issue, but I think men are coming back going, look at all of what I've missed.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a story. I was traveling for about 2 years. So my youngest was born 28 years ago, and I was traveling. I was a consultant, business management consultant, and I was traveling would leave Sunday night, then come home Friday late, because of course every delay of every airport anywhere I've ever gone, right, would happen.
Right.
Maybe, and then 36 hours later, I was on the plane, and I got to a point where I came home and my 2-year-old son started crying because he didn't recognize me. He thought I was some man.
Oh, that must have hurt.
Oh, that hurt a ton. Well, I
bet.
could tell you right now that the next day I just said, look, I'm leaving. I'm
Oh,
not traveling
wow.
anymore. And
Yeah.
I changed that. I
Good for
got
you.
myself a local job and all this. That was then. Do you imagine now where we
Yeah.
were all forced in here? And again, I'm using men as an example, but certainly women, maybe
Yeah,
with the
women
role
as well.
reversal,
Yeah,
right? As well,
absolutely.
coming to
Absolutely.
the realization that it's like, look, I didn't realize that you were, that you knew these things, or didn't realize that you were already at this grade level. I didn't realize, that you want to
Yeah.
go play soccer, and, you never asked because I'm never home. These are very, very real things.
Yes, they are.
And so the question then becomes is, how are we going to operate? How are we
Yeah.
going to operate? And I mean, I have a few ideas, but I don't know if we've got that figured out yet.
No, I don't think we do either, because businesses still have to happen, right, Tom? I mean, there's still demand. There's still demand for the products. There's still demand for things, right? So I'm in a different type of field. I'm in culinary. So, I have a team of like between 17 and 20 people. And so we have to be on the grounds because it's culinary. So we
Sure.
have to be there, right? So it's a whole different mindset. But I was thinking when I was looking at your bio and the leadership and everything that you're doing, and I do want you to get into that in a little bit. And I was wondering, is it also building good leaders to be good leaders? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like more organizations need to be bringing in experts like you, Tom, to come in and teach their leaders how to be good leaders. And I think that would give people maybe that desire to want to go to work. But you don't have to go to work 5-6 days a week, whatever that traditional way of being is, but maybe you'd want to go to work, right? I was thinking about, as I'm talking to you about the food industry, and I was thinking about, some of the interviews I was having for my front end, and some of them are from fast food places, right? And the one thing that they all said was the leadership was horrible. I couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's sad to me, because a big corporation or organization, let's say like a McDonald's or a Burger King or something like that in fast food, we're just going to use that as an example. They should be pouring into people like you that come in and teach their leaders how to be effective leaders, so that you're not just putting a body in that role, right? Because let's face it, turnover is expensive,
Very
right?
much so. Yes.
Turnover is expensive. So tell me a little bit about what it is you're doing at the conservatory group. How is it that you're helping organizations and leaders?
So I'm going to make a sort of a pithy statement here for everybody to sort of jot down. But for the longest time, I think a lot of leaders thought leadership was building more followers. But it really is good leadership builds more leaders.
Right. I agree.
And that's a mind shift all by itself. It might be a nuance, but it's very big. And I'll tell you why. You have to have a lot of self-confidence.
Yeah.
You have to be very comfortable in your skin to be able to do that.
Yep.
Many, many leaders. And it's interesting you bring up sort of that fast food chain and all that discussion. And I'm going to sort of talk about more like that work as being kind of on the ground line managers, if you will. There seems to be an underlying idea that line managers are nothing more than somebody that knows what everybody else is doing. Right. Like, for example, if I'm a line manager, say at a McDonald's, there seems to be this idea that I, as a manager, and I do believe it's part of the organization too, I just need to be able to do what all of my people do it, and I need to do it better.
Right.
Which is just not true. Because what you need to do is make sure that the proficiency of all of the work is built into your team, and that you're busy taking care of your team. Right. And not necessarily doing the work. This is very, very big in sales. And it's a cultural thing in sales because, first of all, and this is my own personal research that I was telling you earlier, is one of the requirements for a salesperson to be promoted is they need to make sure that they meet their quota every year.
Right.
That's interesting, but the idea that a sales manager becomes a super salesperson is ridiculous, right? What they need to do is they need to become sales managers. And we have found that the skill mix from an individual contributor in sales to a sales manager, mind you could say that about fast food, you could say it about any line manager, is about 50% different as far as nurturing people, inspiring people, directing people. When I say coaching and mentoring, I'll give you another example. Lots of times with sales leaders and sales managers, I'll say something like, well, you should be doing this, that, and the other. And people will say something like, well, I don't have any time. And I spend a significant amount of time talking about time management, talking about what is it that you're really doing. Right. Talk about what you value. One of the exercises that I tell people about how to figure out what you value is take a look at your checkbook, take a look at your calendar. Wherever your money's going or wherever your time is going is what you value. Yep. And people sometimes are surprised. It's, first of all, they rarely count that way. But my point is, if you are spending all of your time in the wrong place, then obviously you can't spend that time in the right place. I mean, we all have the same 168 hours a week that we have to figure out what to do with. So lots of times I'll sit there and go, let's do an audit of your calendar. Just open up your calendar. And you look at all this and what's this? And first of all, sometimes the calendar is just empty. You mean to tell me if you look at your calendar, you haven't done anything? Well, no, Tom, I don't write everything down. Okay, let's start writing everything down. Right. And next thing you know, you're spending an hour on this meeting and wasting your time doing something else. Heck, even scrolling TikTok, whatever, right? People spend a lot of time doing the wrong thing, and you end up in the wrong place. Here's another saying. Nobody drifts into your desired goal. Right. Right. Like it's like getting on a boat, right? And you're like, I'm going to go to South America, right? And you just get on the boat and you just don't do anything. You just wait till the waves take you to South America. And you're like, okay, here I am. And that's what that's what time management is. Are people sit there and go, okay, well, I'm just going to do things on a daily basis, whatever shows up on my calendar and my email. And hopefully you drift into your dream job or something.
Right. So
that is
true.
never happened.
That's so true.
So my point is, taking the boat analogy is you got to put a rudder down there. You got to put, your oars down in the water, and you have to start rowing to the place you want to be. Right. And that's using your resources, time, money, and relationships.
Right. So, so when somebody like who's listening right now, because I know my my audience is always really engaged, and that's what I love about my audience. So if somebody wanted to work with you, what specifically do you do with them? How do you take them through your coaching or your program?
Well, specifically, we talk about, and this goes about anybody that's looking to be coached in business or even in personal life. I've done a lot of personal coaching as well. That isn't really my bread and butter, but I've done it in the past because, especially nowadays, where it's so hard to see when starts and when ends. I was just
going to say that,
right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't call work life balance. I call it work life integration,
right?
Because they have to both coexist.
Yeah, they do.
So, obviously
we more than ever.
People are fairly aware of what it is that they want, and they're fairly aware on the fact that they either have it or don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
So people that come to me, nobody ever calls and says, Tom, my life is perfect. Just want to let you know.
Right.
Right. Usually they call and say, I'm not getting the desired result. I'll give you a real world example. Because sometimes it just takes accountability. I had a CEO they called one time, and he says, Tom, he goes, my team is very apathetic. They don't care. They don't care about anything. I said, okay, well, tell me what brought you to that conclusion. One of my favorite questions, by the way. I never want to know. I don't care about the answer. I always care about how you got to your answer.
How you got there. That's good.
And so I asked, and he says, well, I have a team meeting every Friday afternoon, and they all sit in the same spot. Even when people have moved, they still sit in the same place and say the same thing. And so I said to him, I said, well, what'd you do about it? And he was like, what do you mean, what did I do about it? I'm like,
good question.
Obviously it bothers you. So what'd you do about it? He goes, well, I didn't do anything. So they didn't do anything and you didn't do anything. So they're basically doing exactly what you're doing.
Right.
So
I love it, Tom. That's so direct. I freaking love it.
I know. So what's the problem?
Right. Who's
and like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, if you said something and did something different, maybe they would do something different too, right? They're just, you're a leader. You're setting the tone. And therefore, that's very, very important. So that's an example of saying, what is it that you want to have them do? Right. A, tell them, and B, show them. And I'm not saying exactly, but if you don't see something that you like, give them a demo, if you will, right? Just show them what it is that you seek to do. The other point that I want to make here, Neena, is about blame. This is a very important thing I want everybody to walk away with. So many, heck, I would be as far as to say almost every time that I get on a call with somebody, it's, you ask like, how'd you come to that conclusion? Or you'll ask, well, why do you think this is happening? That kind of thing. It's Neena's fault. It's someone else's fault. It's blah, it's it's the economy. It's like, it's all this other stuff. And and some of it I get is true, but here's the problem, folks. The minute you blame or pin the reason on something else, you also smuggle away the solution.
Right. That's
if
good.
Neena, if you're my boss and I'm unhappy and someone says, Tom, why are you unhappy? And I say, well, it's all Neena's fault, whatever that is, fill in the blank. Well, then not only does Neena have the power, but Neena also has the solution. You also have the solution. I have smuggled away. I have abdicated the solution away from what I possibly can do.
Right.
So if you want to fix your, right. So that's why I always ask leaders, and this is the question I always ask leaders after they give me their blame, I say, well, what was it about your leadership that made that happen? And then they'll say, well, I didn't do anything. And I'll say, well, okay, well, then exactly what was going to happen happened. I don't know what to tell you. And obviously they come to the conclusion of saying, well, I guess I should have spoken up, or I guess I should. All right. And then all of a sudden you could see the weight come off their shoulder, because now, even though it's always been in front of them, they feel like they have steps to take.
Right.
They feel like they can take some kind of leadership and direction to fix the problem. And when I think, Neena, when you and I talk about leaders, I think we're talking about everybody on the planet can be leaders. Yeah. We're not talking about people that have to have a title or people working for them. You can be a leader in anywhere you want. And that is one of the key principles to open up your eyes, is understand that once you reframe and rethink about the problem in things about you, things that you can do, it becomes liberating. Write them down. There's things you can't change. Well, you can't change those, but I'm telling you, there's probably a whole bunch of things you can change about your situation.
And the good thing about that too, Tom, is that the things that you want to change, other people are probably yearning for that change as well, yearning for it, but they're not going to do it because you're the leader or the boss or the CEO or whatever you are to the company. And so they're afraid, or not afraid, but maybe timid about doing it. But you know what? Once you start to implement change, and if you're open-minded too, you have to be open to receive maybe a different perspective. It doesn't, that's another thing I think CEOs get wrong all the time, is that we think we're supposed to know it all.
Correct.
That's impossible. You can't know it all. This is why we hire people with a specific skill sets, so that they can know it what we don't know. And I think as CEOs, we have to humble ourselves with that kind of stuff. You agree?
I think what's important too is also part of the problem. So if you think of an organization and you think of, I've got a very small company, and so I'm a doer as well and all that. But if you think about large companies and you think about the customer or the person you're serving, then you have those individual contributors. You're saying you're in the culinary business. I'm assuming you have people that make food and serve and deliver food, right? And then you got managers, and it finally gets to you. Just by definition, you're further away from the action than they are. And so you don't have a perspective of what's actually going on in, on the, what I call the dance floor of the balcony.
Yeah.
Right. You're a leader. You're in the balcony. You can watch people dancing. But when you're on the dance floor, you're sweating. You can see who's a good dancer. You can see who's a bad dancer. I mean, you could see it all happen.
Right.
And as a leader and a CEO, you've got to ask questions like, what's going on over there?
Yeah.
There's a study and there was a book. There's a great book, if anybody's really interested in, called Evidence-Based Management by two gentlemen, Pfeffer and Sutton. And what they talk about, and there's actually a study, it's in the food industry. And they're talking, what they did is they had the same questions for both the servers or the frontline people, and then management, like at headquarters or whatever. And the scores, it would say something like, do people follow procedures? Simple question like that. The line people, the score was really low. The management, the score was really, really high. So it wasn't real much about the score, but it was more about the gap between. And so when you start asking those kinds of questions, like if you're a leader and you can sort of pull yourself out and say, okay, these are the kind of questions. What do you think's happening? Do people follow policies? Are customers happy? Right? Jot those down and then try to get that survey out to your people and see what kind of answers they get. I guarantee you there's going to be a gap. So it's not about whether it's a 1 or a 5 or whatever. It's more about how far apart that perspective is.
Yeah.
And you need to close that gap. Yeah. And most likely you as a leader that is away from the action, you're probably the one that has the wrong view or the wrong expectations.
Oh, yeah. 100%. And that's the good thing I think about a leader who is maybe started, maybe I'll use the culinary since I'm in it, as a dishwasher. right? Because then you remember, oh, I remember going through these things. And so when they bring that up, it's not so foreign to you too. And I think as leaders, CEOs, executives, we should try to get a little bit of the boots on the ground with our people, right? Because it gives you a framework. It gives you a whole view that you maybe didn't know of before. Because some people just get the position because of their degree more than the experience, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's great. So Tom, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
I was, it's interesting because I started my career in the food industry. I started as a busboy, dishwasher, all the way
Me
to I
too.
was a certified broiler chef at one point. Actually
That's
a
awesome.
cook. And what was interesting is, and then I used to fill in as an assistant manager. Now, what was interesting was, I'll give you a perspective that is, you would schedule people for different roles. And one of the things that I quickly learned because I had these roles is what was like outside those roles. For example, if I was, sometimes I got scheduled to be they used to be a term called float, and that person would float from station to station. They had to like know a little bit about everything. But usually they were tasked to like do the heavy cleaning, like cleaning the grill or mopping the floor in the back or something like that. And what would be interesting is, let's say you knew that the next day that person had an important event. When you left that restaurant, you were filthy.
Right.
And then you're thinking, so I'm going to take a shower and do all this. So you're thinking, this is going to take a while. So I probably shouldn't put them in that job. I should probably put them like as the drink server because it's not such a filthy job. And they'll be able to, get their act together sooner because they had this event coming up. Those, when you're able to personalize that leadership, that's when you become the most effective and most useful to your people.
Good. That is really, really good and a great example because it's extremely true. I mean, all of that is really, really true and something that as CEOs and all of you guys who are listening, who are CEOs and leaders and thought leaders and all that great stuff, these are great, great nuggets of gems that Tom is dropping here. And Tom, thank you so much for being on Straight Talk because these are the kind of conversations I like to have because I feel like conversations like this start to impact people's thinking, which then start to impact the way they do things. So this is important. I love leadership. I love this kind of stuff. So thank you for being here and taking the time to spend here with my audience. And so before I let you go, though, you have a lot of knowledge. So I want to make sure that my people know how to get in contact with you, work with you, all that great stuff. So give that to us.
Yeah. So one of my fun party tricks is that if you go to Google and type in Tom Tonkin, the whole first page of Google search is all of my work.
All right,
and
Tom. All right.
So you'd be hard pressed to miss me, but certainly LinkedIn and Twitter.
Okay.
My phone number is even out there. My email's out there. I try to make it really low barrier of entry to get a hold of me. I'm not ceremonious about how to do things. So you'd be hard pressed not to find me.
All right. Go ahead, Tom, with your bad self. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for everything, like all of the amazing feedback and downloads and all this great stuff that you guys have been doing and supporting the people that are on this show. You guys know that I like to bring people on here that are really going to talk to you about something that's going to transform the way you think. And I think Tom has definitely delivered on that. So make sure you guys follow him. You heard him. He's #1 on Google. Once you type his name, go ahead and do that. I think you got to scroll down to the second or third O to find Neena Perez. But thank you guys for being here. You know, I adore you guys so much. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening. You are the best. Okay. I have the best podcasting community ever. I really do. And I appreciate you guys being on here. Make sure you go on to winject.com/register, winject.com/register and register for my free community because I want to be really connected with you and I want us to brainstorm and be with each other and connect in a deeper way. If you are looking for coaching, please make sure that you also email me at hello@straighttalknosugaradded.com. I work with women and I help them develop that business that they are envisioning in their hearts so that they can win. Thank you guys so much for being here. Love you, love you, love you. This is Neena Perez, Straight Talk, No Sugar Added. Until next time.